Alright, today we're going to look at an occurrence that will happen with heads-up displays and that you need to be aware of when flying in high wind conditions using a heads-up display at high angle of climb, which is that the flight path vector does not correspond to the direction the aircraft is flying through the air. What this means is that you have to be aware of the fact that the angle of attack in some situations will be higher than the flight path vector would suggest, or the difference between the attitude indicator and the flight path vector would suggest. So in order to show that, we've set up the simulator here. We're flying around the Faroe Islands, and we have a 49-50 knot wind or so that would be blowing in we're flying into right now. And we'll descend quickly to about 4,000 feet and then make a sharp climb at a low airspeed and bring the plane to 10 degrees angle of attack. And what we'll see once we do that is that the angle of attack indicator will not actually the angle of attack readout we get will not correspond to the difference between the attitude indicator and the flight path vector. We're going to level off and bleed off a little bit of speed. Right, so now I'm going to put the plane at about 130 knots and we're going to make a steep climb back to 8,000 feet. So as we expect, our angle of attack comes up, and once we're stable, we'll make a comparison between our angle of attack readout and what our flight path vector is suggesting. So as we see here, we're leveling out at about an angle of attack of 10 degrees, and our flight path vector would suggest the same as that. It's a little bit above the horizon, and the angle of attack, or sorry, the attitude indicator is a little bit above 10 degrees. So now if we bring the plane into this climb, we wait for it to stabilize again. And our angle of attack indicator again comes out to around just under 10 degrees. Now it's a little bit less than 10 degrees because of the higher thrust setting at the moment. The stall bar here set at 10 degrees, or the angle of attack limit in this case, 10 degrees, reflects that. So the plane is flying at an angle of attack of 10 degrees relative to the air. But when we look at the flight path vector here, this is suggesting an angle of attack closer to 5 degrees. Now the reason for this is, as we said, the flight path vector only shows our movement, the direction of movement of the plane relative to the ground, but not relative to the air. The angle of attack is measured relative to the air. So if we're in this situation and we're using the flight path vector to judge our angle of attack, we won't get the correct the correct information, because again, the angle of attack, if we were now to look at the flight model, we can see here the direction of flowing that the air is flowing. The angle of attack is still 10 degrees, but again, the flight path vector, the difference between the flight path vector and the
altimeter setting
and the attitude indicator is much less than 10 degrees. So in this case, this might lead to the dangerous situation that we pull the aircraft into too high an angle of attack, while our flight path vector is suggesting that our angle of attack is lower. And this is important to notice, of course, to not get into that situation. Now if we reverse the direction of this, we can turn the plane around back into the wing, back down away from the wind. Whoops. I'll drop off a little bit of altitude first as well. Level off and take out the S-speed again. And we climb up to the 3,000 feet per minute. And we'll see the aircraft will settle again at the 10 degrees angle of attack. But the flight path vector suggests this is much higher. It's saying it's closer to 14 or 15 degrees now. Because now the wind is pushing us further forward than for the amount we're climbing, and suggesting that our angle of attack is much higher. So it's important to remember that the flight path vector and the attitude indicator should not be used to reference your angle of attack, and that you need to be aware of your speeds and actual angle of attack when flying, and not be not tunnel in. Because in a situation of, for example, a go around with a strong headwind, you might be led to believe that your angle of attack is much lower than it really is. So I hope that's helpful, and yep, enjoy flying with your heads-up display.